Did you see Tampa Bay wide receiver Antonio Brown took his shirt off and quit in the middle of a game? All Pro Lines has some great jokes for that from @AllProLines on Twitter. If Antonio Brown was playing New Orleans, at least he would have gotten some beads. Antonio Brown just quit in the third quarter, so they made him an honorary Falcon. And knowing Frank Caliendo's luck lately, he probably just perfected his impression of Antonio Brown. Those from All Pro Lines, that is a podcast that I plug every Tuesday because it's one of my favorites. And we have a back and forth promote each other's podcast deal on Tuesdays. I'm just saying. But it's not like I don't like them. Aaron Hodges, my friend in real life, Kostaki Economopoulos, a comedian I am friendly with. Don't think I've ever hung out with him outside of comedy, but we're friendly, you know. They host All Pro Lines. They combine football and jokes. All Pro Lines, wherever you get your shows. From The Hollywood Reporter, Patton Oswalt is expressing an apology and sharing some reflections when discussing his longtime friendship with Dave Chappelle. Yeah, there's a little kerfluffle with Patton Oswalt going on. So on Friday night, Patton Oswalt posted a photo of him and Dave Chappelle. He shared that after Patton played the Seattle Center, Chappelle texted him and said, "Hey, come do a guest set at the arena. Dave is performing at next door." Patton said, "Why not? I waved goodbye to this hell year with a genius that I started comedy with 34 years ago. He works an arena like he's talking to one person," and that's really important. I'm going to talk about that point later. Let's back up. Don't miss this point because it goes into something I'm going to get into. Dave works an arena like he's talking to one person and charming their skin off. Anyway, I ended the year with a real friend and a deep laugh. Can't ask for much more. All right, pretty good. Patton Oswalt hanging out with his friend Dave Chappelle on New Year's Eve. What could go wrong? In a follow-up post, Patton Oswalt provided more insight into his New Year's Eve post, explaining that he and Dave have known each other since they were teenagers and hadn't seen each other in a long time. Okay, that's cool. What's wrong with that? He's a fellow comedian, the funniest I've ever met. I wanted to post a picture and an Instagram story about it, so I did. The friend is Dave Chappelle. 34 years we've been friends. Cool, that all sounds great. We've done bad and good gigs, open mics and TV tapings. Oh yeah, the backlash. Remember the backlash? Yeah. Patton Oswalt then proceeded to take a moment to acknowledge Dave Chappelle's recent controversy in which he was widely blasted for making transphobic comments. You're familiar with that story if you listen to my podcast. Patton wrote, "We 100% disagree about transgender rights and representation. I support trans people's rights, anyone's rights, to live safely in the world as their fullest selves." The Hollywood Reporter writes, though Oswalt emphasized that he will always disagree with where Chappelle stands, he also doesn't believe a seeker like him is done evolving or learning. You know someone that long, see the struggles and changes. It's impossible to cut them off. It's impossible not to be hopeful and open and cheer them on. Patton added he's been carrying a lot of guilt after cutting ties with friends who had views he couldn't agree with or changing ways he couldn't live with. Patton added, "I'm an LGBTQ ally. I'm a loyal friend. There's friction in those traits that I need to reconcile myself and not let cause feels of betrayal in anyone else." Patton then apologized for deleting posts in the comment thread of the original post from New Year's Eve with Dave Chappelle, comments he described as critical ones from LGBTQ writers and crap post by TERF anti-trans orcs looking for clicks and giggles. He was trying to maintain a nice comment thread. "I'm sorry, truly sorry, that I didn't consider the hurt that this would cause or the depth of that hurt. So easy to think someone else needs growth and miss the need in yourself. Gonna keep trying." Seems Patton has a friend, and he took a picture of them on New Year's Eve, and the Instagram comments went crazy, and Patton felt the need to clean it up a little. Still talking about Chappelle, aren't we? From the New York Post, Anna Marie Tendler, John Mulaney's former wife, penned a goodbye to a year full of depression and anxiety while reflecting on, quote, unfathomable loss, coping mechanisms, and her new normal. On Instagram, Anna Marie Tendler wrote, "Over the past 2 years, it seems that change has been synonymous with loss, and collectively, this loss has been unfathomable. It's tempting to construct a poetic list of all we've watched slip through our hands, but what's the point? We already know it and we grieve it daily." She added, "There's no going back. My own brain is well acquainted with the elusiveness of hope that materializes in sporadic and ephemeral waves. In part, and this is what it means to live with depression and anxiety, the circumstances of my year have been harsh and punishing. I find myself asking, when will I feel normal? But in reality, I recognize the normal from before has expired. Normal is an impossibility. There is only new." She revealed her coping mechanisms in 2021 included surviving, creating, and laughing at TikTok videos. "So long, 2021. For better or worse, I will carry a piece of you with me forever." Whew. Boy, I hope she's doing all right. That was pretty dark. Remember earlier in this podcast, I told you to remember the sentence about Dave Chappelle. I'll read it again. Patton Oswalt said, Dave Chappelle works an arena like he's talking to one person and charming their skin off. Okay, remember that? Remember that? All right. So I went to watch the Standups on Netflix. I'm like, I host a comedy podcast, and I had just finished watching Station 11. Have you seen Station 11 on HBO Max? Not really a spoiler. It's about a worldwide pandemic. A little close to home. I finished that. Really, the show. I was feeling a little dark. I'm like, I better watch something funny. I put on the Stand-Ups on Netflix. Now, I come into this with mixed emotions because I host the comedy podcast and I want to be a champion of comedy to whatever degree I can from the basement. I'm not here to hate on things at all, unless maybe it's a TikTok video or a taco business you run on the side. Other than that, I come here to have fun, hopefully keep you company in the morning. So I watch the Stand-Ups, and I'm aware that I'm a comedy snob. I put on Brian Simpson. He was the first one of the stand-ups that came on. And I'm like, I'm not familiar with Mr. Simpson. I'm looking forward to this. And the first three, I don't even want to call them jokes, 3 points he made got clapter. And I'm like, these aren't even jokes. This is just your opinion on the way the world is, which is fine. So for me, it didn't land. I don't want to tell anyone how to perform your act. Whatever your act is, that's your act. But for me, wasn't doing it for me. 3 straight things of clapter, so I bailed. And I'm like, all right, who else is on this list? Mark Normand. And I know Mark Normand to be money, as we used to say in Queens. Always funny, always enjoy his writing, always enjoy his performances. So I put on Mark Normand. And again, let me go back to the Dave Chappelle line. I'm going to read it for the 4th time. Dave works an arena like he's talking to one person and charming their skin off. So I watched Mark Normand, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, something's wrong here. And then I figured out what it is. Mark's performance feels recited. Any good stand-up comedian has polished this material, especially if it's being taped for a Netflix special, right? So this is material you know works, but I just felt like Mark was reciting it from rote and not feeling the audience as well. And as I watched it, I was thinking, who am I thinking of that does this really well? Is Dave Chappelle. Whether you agree with Dave's material or not, the way he performs it, he feels the crowd. He surfs the crowd's emotions. He leaves beats. He mugs for the camera. He leaves some room. He takes a breath. He anticipates your reaction to his material and pushes back against it. It's almost like he's surfing. And Mark is up there in this special, and I like Mark. I'm not here to bash Mark, but it just, here's my material, and I'm going to go through it. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And there's a couple points where he just segues from one topic to another, and these are hard segues, just right turns in the middle of the act. And I'm like, this just feels like a recited performance and not quite next level the way Dave Chappelle is. Watch Mark Normand on the stand-ups. Again, I love Mark's material. I just felt like this particular special didn't click. I told you George Lopez had to leave in the middle of his show on New Year's Eve. A representative of George told USA Today that George is back in LA recuperating from a case of the flu. Yeah? Hope George is doing okay. I'm on my way to London right now so I can watch Toast of Tinseltown. So when I talk about it later in the week, how else would I have seen Toast of Tinseltown unless I was in London, right? It's not airing in the United States where I normally am based. Toast of Tinseltown starts tonight, 10 p.m. BBC Two. I'll be in London watching it, so I can tell you about it. The whole series will then be available on BBC iPlayer. If you are not familiar with Toast of Tinseltown, it is the follow-up series to Toast of London, one of my favorite things. Stephen Toast, played by Matt Berry, actor, voiceover artist, and legend of the London theatrical scene, is an angry and frustrated man. After a final, very violent confrontation with his old nemesis, Ray Purchase, Stephen Toast heads off for a new life in America where he's been promised a leading role in a major Hollywood franchise movie. With nowhere to stay and no contacts in Hollywood, Toast is grateful for an offer of accommodation from a mysterious fellow passenger called Russ Nightlife, played by Fred Armisen. Russ has no friends, it seems, apart from Billy, who's played by Rashida Jones. Billy is an aide who comes daily to the apartment. On the road to making it big in America, Stephen Toast meets an extremely angry director, becomes a success in a soap opera playing a doctor, bites the ear off a Hollywood A-lister, and gets lost in the desert. He may be out of London, but he's never out of bad luck. The folks at whattowatch.com caught up with Matt Berry. Hey, Matt, will we see regulars like Clem Fandango and Ray Purchase? Matt says you can expect to see all the regulars. What was the inspiration? The main inspiration was to take Toast out of his/our comfort zone and plonk him somewhere unfamiliar with a new set of characters and situations with all the difficulties they create. Have you ever worked with anyone like Stephen Toast? Matt's answer, I've always worked with Stephen Toast in one form or another. How would you describe Toast for those who have not seen the show before? Matt says, it's a comedy series. Might be for you, might not. Not much I can do. The Interrobang did a lengthy article where they asked comedians who they thought would break out in 2022. You can read that on theinterrobang.com. I'll pick at their list 3 of the more famous names on the list. Gary Goldman says the comedian I think is going to break out in 2022. I'm going to give 2, and they're roommates, and they're both brilliant, original, funny, nice people. Ethan Simmons Patterson and Jordan Jensen. They're incredible. They're a revelation. Enjoy and remember who sent you there. Okay, Gary Goldman. Joe List says the breakout comedian will be Ronan Hirschberg. And I'm not just saying that because he lives directly above me. He's about to shoot a special. He's my favorite comedian right now, period. You're going to love him when you see him. And Tim Dillon says Marcelo Hernandez. He's a funny dude. He's opened for me a few times. He's a New York-based comedian from Florida. He's Cuban, and his family came to this country on a raft, so he deserves it. Vulture had done their list of 22 comedians to keep your eye on. One of those 22, Hannah Pikes. Hey, Hannah Pikes, describe your comedy in 5 words. Absurd, unhinged, joyful, ridiculous, Muppet. Hannah, if there were a 90s-style sitcom built around you, blah, 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 she would call it Hannah, get a load of this tall gal. It would just be an hour of me reaching for things in hard-to-reach places for neighbors, friends, strangers. Somehow it would last 10 seasons, and there would be an uproar when it got canceled. People would lose their minds. Maybe it would be called Hannah Goes the Distance or Hannah's Helping Handas. Who are your favorite comedians right now? So many people. Holy hell, how much time you got? Jason Titus, Nick Shepard, Nori Reed, Chloe Feynman, Grace Kulenschmidt, Charles Rogers, Ego Nwodum, Clown Zoo as a whole, Meg Statler, Robbie Hoffman, Carl Tart, Hannah Einbinder, Please Don't Destroy, Zeke Nicholson, and so many more. All right, Hannah Pikes, best and worst comedy advice. Some great advice I've received to see how much further you can take a character. How much more can you involve the audience? How dumb can you go? I believe that was from Natalie Palamides and Chris Damani at Standups, 2 of the most magic and fearless performers at one of my favorite shows. I got so used to doing a quick character once or twice live and then abandoning it. Instead of continuing to build in mind for more each time, it's nice to see them evolving into standalone pieces rather than fleeting bits. A less productive thing I've done as a comedian is to try and derive my entire comedic identity from an institution. I regularly felt a deep sense of imposter syndrome, and it seldom felt inclusive for myself and many others. But the less I tried to fit in elsewhere, the more I found community, and the more I made my own imprint. That makes sense. Be your own comedic compass. My friend Nick said that, but it's actually going to be my expression now. And that is your comedy news for today. If you enjoy what I do here, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. Throw $5 in the tip jar. Susan did just that. Thank you, Susan. Buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. Follow this show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. Oh yeah, Mark Maron had the Smothers Brothers on. I was really excited to check that out, and maybe they got a little old and the energy wasn't quite there. Sorry, really wanted to like it. Such a hater today. See you tomorrow.